everyone. I'm super excited to introduce Vic Ceridono to you on this episode. She is a journalist, a blogger, and an influencer, originally from Brazil, but also based in London, like me. Vicky is truly a digital media pioneer. She launched her blog over 12 years ago. She has a book, and she has been a reference for content creation on the internet and social media for a long time. She was one of the youngest editors of beauty and fashion for a sister magazine from Vogue Brazil called RG, so RG. And she was also Glamour Brazil's international editor-at-large for 3 years. She now focuses solely on her channel and her social media and her work as an influencer, and constantly works with brands such as Clinique, Chanel, Dior, Jo Malone, and a lot more. This is a really great interview for anyone who needs a bit of a pick-me-up. She has always been a very driven person. She started working when she was really young, and she carved her own path, even though people called her crazy. So that's it. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Hi everyone, we're here with one of our mentors and a long-term friend, Vic Ceridono, who is a digital media pioneer, author, influencer. What else you are? A former editor-at-large, lots of things. And we are going to talk about how she became such a fabulous human. So Vicky, tell us right now, what is it that you do, where you're at, and what is the worst job you ever had?
Hi, everyone. Hi, Belle. Thank you for having me. Long-term friend indeed. I think it's the first time we're actually having a conversation in English. So
yes.
We'll probably have some laughs during this podcast. Thank you for the very kind introduction. At the moment, I am focusing on my own stuff. So basically, I am a journalist, and I've made my blog 12 years, almost 13 years ago. So I always had this kind of two parallel careers. As a journalist, I worked on a fashion website in Brazil. Then I started contributing for Vogue Brazil. Then I became beauty editor of Vogue Brazil. So I was with Vogue for 11 years. And then I moved to Glamour Brazil as editor-at-large. By then I was already living in London. So I was born in São Paulo. I grew up in São Paulo. And I moved to London 7 years ago. So I always had my journalism kind of side and my influencer kind of side, which in the beginning, that wasn't the name.
Yeah.
So because I started a really long time ago, I'm like a dinosaur of the internet. So when I started, it was a blog and I was a blogger. Then came YouTube, then came Instagram. And now I'm still doing all of these channels, still focused in beauty. Instagram, my own Instagram, nowadays it's kind of everything. So I do lifestyle, I do traveling, I do fashion, and I do beauty. Then I have my blogs, Instagram. My blog is called Dia de Beauté, which is a name that in English is very tricky because it doesn't make any sense, but it means beauty day, mixing Portuguese and French. So yeah, complicated, but 13 years, I can't change it anymore. I have the blog, I have my blog's Instagram, and then I have my YouTube channel. I have a team. So 1 year ago, I left Condé Nast altogether because I was still doing both until August last year. And I decided to leave and focus on my own thing because it's very busy.
Yeah. Time consuming.
Very time consuming. I have a double life because I am split between Brazil and London. I still work a lot in Brazil. I still have my biggest readership is still in Brazil. So, but then in London, I have much more contacts nowadays and I have much more events. So it's busy when I'm here. It's busy when I'm there, which I love, to be honest. And worst job I ever had, I can't say because I've never had a bad job.
That's what I thought, but I mean, you've worked. I want to say before we go into this that I still remember the day you launched your blog and you emailed us from school and you were like, hey guys, I started a blog. A blog is like a website. Like you had to explain what a blog was. And we're like, okay.
I don't remember that.
Yeah.
This is so funny. Oh my God, we have to find this email.
I don't know. I don't have access to my Hotmail anymore. I mean, I had
but I had Gmail by then, so it's
really?
the same. Yeah.
I think because I remember I was like a blog. But yeah, you were always very driven, and you were buying like Allure magazines when none of that sold in Brazil, and you were taken. Like in Brazil, it's very fashionable to be always 10, and you were one of the first friends that I had that was, wearing hats and lots of sunscreens and being like, oh my God, no, I'm 14, no wrinkles, like so. And meanwhile, we were like putting oil and like Coke on our bodies, like look like very burnt humans.
True story. I've always been really into beauty, and I love remembering these moments because we have really been friends since school. So it's funny to kind of get reconnected with my teenage self through your memories.
Yeah.
And it's true. Yeah, I would spend all my money, my allowance. I would spend everything on magazines, and obviously like all these magazines that were imported and they were so expensive, and I wouldn't let anyone touch my magazines. So sometimes I would go during break at school to that newsstand, remember, close to his house. And then I would buy the magazines and come back, and I'll be like, if the class was boring, I would be like reading my magazines. Yes, and also not tanning. It's I haven't tanned my face for 20 years, and I remember having this conversation with our friends, like you are friends, and they're like, "Why are you doing this? Like, you are not gonna notice now, but in 20 years' time, you will see the difference on your skin." But people don't think that long term.
No, so especially now, when you're teenagers.
No, especially
zero long term.
It's really funny. Now I get so many messages from friends saying like, "Wow, your skin is looking amazing. What have you been doing?" I'm like, it's not what I have been doing lately.
Yeah.
It's like 20 years of, conscience. But anyways, this is very personal, and it's fine if you don't want to, if you want to tan your face, it's fine. But yeah, I think I always had I always knew what I wanted to do. I think I was lucky in that sense because I knew I wanted to work. I love writing. So I knew I wanted to be in like media. At the time, there was no such thing as YouTube or internet. So when we were at school, so I always thought like magazines, mainly magazines, like women's magazines. And so I went to journalism school and university. And when I started, my first year, I was like, oh, wait, there is no option of working for like a women's magazine. According to what I can see here in my university, like you have to do whatever newspaper or serious magazines and talk about economy or politics or, what's going on in the city or whatever. I was like, oh, I really wanted to do like the whole fashion and beauty thing. And all my teachers thought I was completely crazy. So this was like 2004.
Yeah.
My first year of university. And the world was really different by then, really, really different. But for me, it was something that I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll have to start interning, covering whatever economy. But at some point, like there are magazines, so I am going to work for them at some point. So all the assignments that I had on my like whole 4 years of journalism university, I would always do things related to fashion and beauty. And when I was on my second year, I started working for this website, and then it was really lucky because then I was already like internet, and then I started to see like there was kind of a disconnection, I feel, between what I was learning at university and what was actually going on with the world. My year was the last year, my uni year was the last one that didn't have digital curriculum.
You were really in the turning point.
Yeah. But then I think I kind of always embraced all the opportunities that I had, and I never had any problem working a lot. I think especially when you're a teenager around, 19, 20, you really want to enjoy life and not be very serious about things. But I've always been very serious about work. I think it's in my personality. Like I like to work. So I always did like 2-3 things at the same time. I've always been in the same industry. So now it's 15 years since I started working, and I've literally been like this whole time in the same industry.
Yeah, but it's amazing because I remember we were all still figuring out, and I think you were like an editor of Vogue really early on. You were super young.
Yes, because I actually became editor, fashion and beauty editor of a magazine that they had in Brazil at the time before Condé Nast came to Brazil. So the publishing house that used to publish Vogue Brazil, they had another magazine. Remember what called RG?
Yeah.
So I started freelancing for Vogue, and after 3 years, they asked me to be fashion and beauty editor of that magazine. So I think I was like 22.
Yeah.
Something like this.
But even,
so
I think even before that, I remember when I met you when we were like teenagers, you were still, you told me that you used to go and like intern at like Fashion Week.
Mm-hmm.
So you worked for free a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but how did you always go and ask for those opportunities? Like how did you go and pursue people? How did you get those things?
Yeah, it's funny. I think it's a mix of opportunity and embracing and going after the opportunity. So obviously I was lucky because, for example, I have, so my mother's cousin wife.
My God. Okay.
Yeah. Mother has a cousin, has a wife. So she's not my aunt technically, but like my aunt. She has a PR agency, fashion PR agency in Brazil. It was already one of the biggest by then, and it still is. So I went actually to a show because I had an invite that my other aunt, I never pronounce aunt so badly. So my aunt was like, oh, I have some invites. Do you want to go to see a fashion show? And me and my sister were like, yes, 100%. So I was always into fashion and beauty. I was reading like all these magazines since I was very young. And my mother was like, what is this child? It's so strange. And I went and I met this aunt that has the PR agency, and I was like, this is so amazing. I'm loving everything. Like, I want to work with you. My sister and we did 7 seasons of São Paulo Fashion Week working for free. And it was just literally the highlights of my year, both the January and the July season. And it's funny because at that time, it was our first, second, and third years of high school.
Yeah.
So final school years, everyone traveling around in Brazil, summer holidays, going to the beach. And I was like, no, priorities, doing my pre-internship for like a week or 2 at São Paulo Fashion Week. But for me, it's just like, it was really about being there and seeing people. And I was always going to talk to all the big like fashion journalists at the time, who are still the same actually nowadays. And I came to know all of them, and it's actually funny remembering that. But I would go to all of them like, hi, I would love to intern with you. And I'm like, oh, what university do you do? I'm like, oh, no, I'm still in school. And they were like, okay, you have to first be in a university to then be able to intern. I'm like, oh, okay. That's kind of how I made my way.
You ask, like you introduce yourself to people.
I think it's really important to go and ask and talk to people, get in touch. You might get a lot of no's, but, just be there and ask. And even when I got my job at the fashion website with Gloria Calil, and that was because I had spoken to her a few times at São Paulo Fashion Week.
Okay.
And then by coincidence, she was buying flowers from my mother.
Okay.
One day, my mother does like flower arrangements and etc. And then, so my mother kind of knew her. And then she was like, oh, your daughter, she's doing journalism now. No, I actually need someone. So, sometimes it's not going to happen then and there, but you have to build the connections.
Yeah.
Networking is for sure the most important thing. And you can never think that things are so straightforward. So, I'm going to get in touch with these people and they will all I'll have opportunities for sure. But you have to keep feeding it,
Yeah.
And then when you get any opportunity, you need to embrace it and just work and be there. I remember when I started, I was an intern and this was a fashion website.
Yeah.
They didn't have a beauty section. Everyone on the team loved fashion. I was the only one who loved fashion, but also beauty.
Okay.
So I basically started being like, okay, so can't we do some like beauty contents? And they're like, yes, of course, fine. If you want to do it, you do it. And then I started doing it, and I started building the beauty section. So I was like an intern editor, which was amazing for me. So, and then I started building the relationship with the PRs.
Okay.
Then I started being invited to the events. So if I had just, if I just did what I was supposed to do, that wouldn't happen. So for me, that was so valuable because I was literally an intern, but I had the connection, like directly. And then some days I remember my boss, she would be like, Friday, 7 p.m. V, let's organize the catalogs.
Oh, God.
And you know how you can be like, oh, I'm going to kill this woman. It's 7 p.m. on a Friday. I want to go to the bar and meet my friends. But I was like, you know what? It's such a rare opportunity that I have to just be with my boss, just the two of us, and to talk to her and to see how she works, So when she was organizing remember when there were catalogs? Huh?
Yeah.
Like you don't have that anymore. But just seeing how she worked and how she would like deal with the catalog, what was important to keep, what was not important to keep, and why, and how kind of like understanding how her mind worked.
Yeah.
That for me was, it's the things that you are never going to learn at university. I think so many things you don't learn at university, and it's life and working that is going to show. And on the other hand, I think the fact that I never, complained or was like, oh, this is so boring, and be like complaining, whatever. I think they really valued that because they knew they could count on me. So when there were more important things to do and, that they needed someone that they knew would deliver, they knew I could deliver. So I think it's kind of, it's a kind of work ethic that cannot be lazy.
Yeah.
Especially when you're starting. I feel like now I can be lazy 15 years later, but not when you're starting.
And you wanted to learn, right? Like you had the hunger, but then you started your blog then like 12, 13 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So how was that? How was building that? Because it wasn't like there was a lot of, were there any, probably some international blogs around, but not a lot in Brazil. I mean, I don't remember. I mean, obviously I'm not the best demographics because I'm not in the fashion or the beauty industry, but I only know what I know from you and the people around you, but I don't remember having a lot of options.
There weren't actually. No. So basically, because I started working for a website, so I was already on the digital universe. And then I started freelancing for Vogue. So I was already having my digital journalism experience, my print journalism experience. But as a reader, when beauty blogs started to show up in the US mainly, and a few in the UK, I loved reading them because it's a completely different, like nowadays, it's crazy to think about a world without this kind of communication. But back then, 13 years ago, you didn't have, all the information came through a publication. It wasn't personal in any sense. So that really interested me to have the direct communication and to have it like as my experience. So one of the questions that I got the most throughout my career when I've been interviewed is, how do you choose what you're going to talk about on your blog and what you're going to talk about on Vogue back when I was beauty editor of Vogue? It's not even a question because it's so different. Like the way you're going to write for Vogue and the way you're going to write a blog post, it's completely different. So the kind of the bias,
Yeah.
When I actually, my blog is a great case of creative procrastination. Because I was supposed to be doing my end of, how do you call it?
The thesis? The dissertation.
Yeah, dissertation, which actually my dissertation was a radio show, which that's
really?
why I want to do a podcast, which I never managed to like organize myself because things got in the way.
Yeah.
But my dissertation for university was a radio show, a radio show like about beauty, basically because,
oh my God, that's amazing.
Not very noble reason, right? Because I failed a second year subject.
Yeah, like module.
Yeah, it's very confusing to talk about this in English, but
yeah, I know.
Yeah, like a module of the second year, there was a prerequisite for a module of the third year. There was a prerequisite for the writing dissertation.
Oh, wow.
And because
okay.
I failed that, I was behind. So I couldn't do the writing one. And then the video one, back in the day, there was no way I could do something on my own.
Yeah, because
which
you
nowadays
needed, like,
would be
equipment.
exactly.
Like, yeah.
You needed like at least, at least 2 people. And obviously no one from my class wanted to do a fashion and beauty related TV show. They were like, what? So I had to go with the thing I could do on my own, and that was the radio one. So that was basically a podcast.
That's incredible.
So funny. Yeah. So, and then when I was supposed to be doing something related to that, and I was like, procrastinating, I was like, you know what? I'm going to create my blog. It's about time. Like there are so many already in the US. I think, this is a media that I really believe. And then I created my blog.
Do you remember like 1 or 2 blogs that you followed at the time?
They don't exist anymore.
Really?
Yeah.
You survived.
Yeah.
You are like the cockroach that survives the dinosaur meteor.
Yes.
Except you're much prettier than obviously. But like,
yeah, no, but it's fascinating. I think, in the end, this long internet track record, being consistent and working on the internet, creating content for real, like very professionally for 13 years it's quite remarkable. Yeah. It's not something that I planned for, that I could imagine, but it is nowadays when I talk to people about that, it's like, it's a long time to be alive on the internet,
Yeah.
Because it changes so much. So you have to adapt. Like in the beginning, my thing is writing. I love writing. It's crazily the thing I do the least nowadays. And, in the beginning of my blog, it was basically just the copy. There was not even pictures. There weren't pictures. Then pictures started to be relevant. And then I've always been so bad taking pictures. So then I have to learn how to take pictures, and then videos. And then I have to learn how to edit videos. Thank God, 10 years ago, I found an editor for my videos. So that I didn't have to do again, because I'm really bad at it. But it's crazy. And then, you have to adapt to the changing landscapes. It's really interesting. It's very dynamic. That's why I love it as well.
And now even faster, right? Because social media is like
even
changing
faster.
Like crazy.
Yeah, like literally one day you're doing something and then it's like, oh, now it's Snapchat. Then you're like, oh my God, what is this? I need to go into this platform. And then you go, and then no more Snapchat. Because now Instagram has Insta stories. Oh, okay. So you can do everything on Instagram easier. Okay. TikTok. Oh God, TikTok. And then you're like, but I don't think TikTok works for me, because it's like kids dancing. How can I like translate beauty content to that? And then like, oh, okay, I understand how. No more TikTok. Yeah. Now it's Reels. I'm like, you have to. But the problem is the other platforms, normally they don't die. So you just add and add. So you have to do YouTube, you have to do the blog, you have to do Instagram, you have to do Insta stories, you have to do IGTV, you have to do lives, you have to do Reels. So it's a lot. So, I mean, nowadays I have a team. I've had a team for a while, but still it's a lot. And then and then 7 years ago when I moved to London, I started working, like monetizing my work as a blogger / influencer. So that took almost half of my blog's life to happen.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh
because
my God.
of my contract with Condé Nast. I couldn't monetize it. So my blog was a hobby for 6 years.
And a very heavy hobby. Because you were already kind of big at some point, I think.
Yeah. I was lucky because it was one of the first beauty blogs in Brazil. So that, it is a competitive advantage anyway.
For sure, yeah.
If you manage to maintain the relevancy of it. It was really big, and it was really like a reference in the market in Brazil, but it wasn't something that I earned anything from. And then 7 years ago, when I moved to London, my contract with Condé Nast changed. So I was still beauty editor at Vogue, but then everything changed in terms of what I could do. And then I was free to start monetizing. And it was a really tough process for me because I am not a businesswoman. So for me, it was really strange, like monetizing my content that, used to be completely not monetized before. And, selling yourself. How do you sell yourself? How do you know how much to charge? That was a very like long and slightly painful learning process.
Yeah.
I would say this was my biggest challenge, like in my career, like the shift to, start monetizing my blog.
Did you have to pitch yourself to the brands, or were they coming to you at that point?
So the whole like blogging world was already about doing, the ads and all the sponsored posts. So this was something that was already happening and I couldn't do it. So I had the contact already with the brands. So when I was okay that I could do it, I was like, okay, so now I can do it. When you have anything, like think of me. Now I can work. I mean, being paid for. But it's really strange. In the beginning for me, it was really strange. And I was really worried that people would be like, okay, no, we cannot trust her anymore because now she's getting paid for it, to do it.
Like your audience wouldn't.
Mm-hmm. But then, you just understand that if you do things correctly and especially if you always disclose if it's a collaboration or something that it's paid for, which sounds so obvious to say, but a lot of times it's not disclosed. Still today, especially
Really?
7 years ago. Yeah. So, it can be kind of like a funny gray area. So for me, it was a learning process, and also having a team was a big learning process because it was always like me doing everything. How do you have someone writing? So, there's a lot of changes and evolutions, but I think nowadays, also because everything is more professional in the whole like blogging influencing world. So now I feel like it's good.
So who did you talk to when you were trying to figure out how much to sell yourself for?
So
did you have any friends in the area?
Yeah. So luckily I still have a lot of friends in this industry that were like doing blogging and those things. So I talked to a few of them, and then I had an assistant at the time that helped me with basically with emails, and then she started helping me more with other things, thinking a little bit about, I did a celebration for my blog's 5th birthday just before I moved to London, and then she helped me to organize it. So when I had this opening of I need someone to deal with the commercial side, she helped me. And then after a few years, I went to an agency, like a talent agency, to manage stuff for me. I think it's really hard when you are the creative side to also be the one selling.
Yeah.
It's complicated. It's good to have someone selling.
Especially because you're selling it's very you, right? It's very personal.
Yeah, but how much is it, like just saying the price? No, it's a bit strange. So it's good to have someone that is dealing. And also there's a whole other universe of, you have to invoice. So all those things, if you are doing everything, it can be very full on. Probably the creative part is going to suffer if you're busy with the whole kind of bureaucracy.
Because in between one of those times while you were doing everything, you also wrote a book.
Ah, yeah.
That was a lot of writing, at least, no?
Yes. But my book is 5. It's turning 5. It's crazy. No, unthinkable.
How was that? Was it a good process?
It was amazing. It was, I think every journalist has this secret or not so secret dream, desire of writing a book. Because when you work for, maybe a newspaper, a daily publication, a weekly or a monthly, it's so ephemeral.
Yeah, ephemeral. Yeah.
Ephemeral. And a book is going to be there forever. It was something I had on my mind, something that I really wanted to do, but I was like, no, I don't have the time. Because when I moved to London, another big challenge, so I would say if I had 2 big challenges, were the shift to like monetizing my work as a blogger, journalist, whatever, influencer, and also moving to London and starting from scratch my networking.
I would know about that because, I know, but you have to tell people.
It was really interesting for me because I was, as I said, I've been in the same industry for so long. So I had been in that industry in Brazil. I knew everyone and I had the higher position on what I did. That was beauty editor at Vogue. There was no other job being a beauty journalist that was more important than that. So basically I knew everyone and I had everything, anything I needed I would have. Like I had all the exclusives in Brazil, all the exclusives, like anything that would launch or a new brand arriving, it was amazing. And then when I moved, I knew no one.
Good stuff.
And it's interesting because Condé Nast I don't know how it is nowadays, but they didn't promote like an interaction between markets. It's very individual. So each market is completely unrelated to the other. Maybe, in Europe, they are more used to doing like press trips with like the international European at least. So they know each other. But being from Brazil, I was completely removed. I didn't know. It wasn't like, oh, okay, I moved from, I'm from Vogue Brazil. I moved to London. I'm going to be going to Vogue House. Like, no. It took me like, I think probably almost 2 years to get to know Jess, she was beauty editor at the time. Nowadays, she's beauty director. So it's literally like I subscribed to and also another funny thing is that the brands, there is no connection. So whatever, I have a really good relationship with MAC in Brazil. It's not like they're going to be like, oh, so get in touch with the PR in the UK, whom I know and I can like introduce. Like, no, there aren't no connections at all. So I had to do it from scratch, and I subscribed to this platform, which is really useful, called Fashion Monitor or Diary Director. I think those two are really good. So you pay a monthly fee, which is not low. It's an investment because normally like the companies, the publication will have that. So I was paying it like myself.
Like you, yeah.
To have access to all the PR contacts of any brand that I wanted.
Really?
Yeah, it's really, really interesting. And you also get like some news and updates. So events, you have access to kind of like an event schedule, so you know what's going on. So I started literally like from the brands that we have in Brazil, emailing the people here and be like, hi, my name is, introducing myself, and be like, if you have the time, I would love to go for a coffee. And because basically I was still covering everything here for Brazil. And then I had my platforms as well. And at the time, my Instagram for UK standards was already very big. Okay. I think I had like 100,000 followers, maybe less, but it was a lot at the time. For here, the UK was pretty behind on Instagram when I moved. It wasn't like a professional platform. It was kind of like a personal whatever, So it was really interesting, like building that from scratch. So that was a lot of networking.
But to go to Fashion Week and stuff, could you go with the magazine or did you have to do it yourself?
So for Fashion Weeks, I did a lot of Fashion Weeks. Ever since I moved, I kept doing it. And in the beginning, I would go as Vogue. So I would try so basically like Fashion Week is, like, for example, MAC sponsors a lot of backstages on all the 4 cities, New York, London, Milan, and Paris. So you can request for backstage access. So I would do that. And then you have some things already. And then you try to get the invites, covering for Vogue Brazil. So you try, and then you get the invites, and then you go to the showrooms and the presentations and the shows and the backstage, and you start meeting people. So the first time, my first ever London Fashion Week, I knew 0 people. So I would then I was already kind of, okay, I was in touch with the PR via email, but then I would arrive backstage. I was like, I know no one. So I would just go and like see the makeup and listen to like the explanation from the makeup artist. And I would see like all the other journalists, like the rest of the press. Obviously I started following everyone when I moved here. So all the editors, all the directors from all the publications, like the local publications, all the bloggers, everyone. And then you start meeting people. You have to go and talk, and sometimes you see someone once, twice, 3 times, and then you're like, oh, and you start talking, and it's a very interesting process. Yeah. And for me, the best part was that it was like if I was starting again in terms of my enthusiasm. Because when you are too settled and you're too kind of, okay, I got to this point, and then you're like, okay, now I think everything's kind of boring.
Yeah, like you peaked.
Yes. And then when I kind of peaked in Brazil, I was like, okay, now move. And it was really fun because then I was like, when I was in Brazil, my last year in Brazil, I was like, oh my God, so many events. I don't want to go to the events. Like I would send my assistant sometimes because I go, when you have something, you're like, oh my God, I don't want to do this. And then I came here. I was like, I had one event in 15 days. One event. I was like, so excited for this one event. Like literally, I was like, but this is exactly what I was doing in Brazil. But just because everything, it's a new challenge, and then you're excited and enthusiastic enthusiasm is back.
But it's good because you're like outgoing. So you would go not knowing anyone and go like, hi.
But you know what? I found out when I moved, I am very shy. I know it's great. When I say this to people who know me, they make the same face you just did. Like, sorry, what? I think I'm missing something here. But no, it's not easy. I have to say, like, I remember my first event that I went in London as press was the opening of the Dior Beauty Boutique in Covent Garden. I got there and I didn't even anticipate how that experience was going to be, because I was so used to going to events in São Paulo and knowing everyone. And also because I was born and raised in São Paulo, even if I didn't know, so when I started working, interning in São Paulo, I didn't know anyone in the industry as well. But there was always someone you would know, or like friend of friend, like somehow it was still kind of like a familiar place.
Yeah.
So I was so used to that. I was like, I arrived at the event at Dior, and then I'm like, oh, I actually don't know anyone. Wow, that's so strange. Like, what do I do? So first thing I did was the obvious thing. Like, I looked for the PR, couldn't find her. I didn't know her, but I knew her name. So I was like, okay, let's find the PR. Couldn't find the PR. I'm going to do the cover. So I was taking pictures of the store, doing like whatever. There was no Insta stories at the time, but whatever it is that we did 7 years ago on Instagram. And then, okay, so they offered me a glass of champagne. I was like, glass of champagne. Saw the store. Then I found the PR. She said, nice to meet you. You like the boutique? Thanks. Thanks for coming. So there is a reception upstairs.
Okay.
Okay. And then I went upstairs and it was like a social event. I'm like, oh, what do you do when you don't know anyone? First thing, you are very tempted to be on your phone. But if you're on your phone, you're not going to meet anyone. But everyone, they all knew each other and they were talking. How do you like break into like a group of people talking and be like, hi? It was so strange. And I was like, oh, I have no idea what to do. I stand there kind of like drinking my champagne, being on my phone and then not being on my phone, because if I was on my phone, no one was going to talk to me, but then no one's talking to me anyway. So I was on my phone again. And I was like, okay, I think I have to leave. Yeah. So I left and like, that was a very strange experience. But then, you know, that it's like that. You start meeting people and then you realize when you feel like an outsider, you look and you think everyone is an insider and you are the outsider. But there are always many outsiders in any situation.
Yes, that's
like some
true.
people are insiders, but some people are also outsiders. And then when you start to realize that, you kind of spot, you know, the people who would be more maybe receptible to like a random person coming and talking to you. It's really interesting.
That's good. It's a good skill to have.
Yeah. I think, you know, it doesn't matter. I think I am shy, but I'm also outspoken. So you have to forget the shyness and just go and like
go for it.
Yeah.
And now you know lots of people here and you have
now I
lots of friends in the industry.
So it's really funny because when I meet new people nowadays, a newer PR that, you know, I've been here before her, and then I always tell these stories because I think people relate, you know, when you say like, you know, I came here and I didn't know anyone, and it's hard, but I think it's what you make of the situation. And for me, it was always more like an exciting challenge than, you know, oh my God, I'm suffering. I moved to a new place. I don't know anyone. Like I want my old life back. You know, I was always kind of like, this is an interesting challenge.
I suffered in the beginning because I was like a big fish in a small pond, and I came here and everyone was like, yeah, it doesn't matter what you did.
The pond is now really big.
The pond is a freaking ocean, girl, swim, and you're like a goldfish. But I think that's the actual way to look at things. Like, oh, it's a new challenge. And for me, it was also good in it because I also decided to stay and brace myself for the impact and learn, because obviously like everything in Brazil is more restricted. It's like a regional market in most ways. And so you come here and you have to talk to people from all over the world, right? Like everyone speaks 3 languages or something, and it's really enriching, but you have to have the gut to have some nose and people like looking down and you're like, who are you? You're a newbie. I mean, you've been blogging since you were like in diapers, and they're like, well, but we don't know you, you know?
Exactly. I think it's having the gut, and at the same time, it sounds like nonsense, but I think it's the balance between being very self-confident and at the same time not taking yourself too seriously. Because then you're like, you have to be open for, you know, a bit of frustration. You cannot be like, okay, can't start doubting yourself, but you have to be open to like, okay, this is going to be hard, but you will try. And in the end, very few people know exactly what they're doing anyway. So most of the time, you know, it's like kind of try and you learn along the way. So I think when you kind of understand that, it makes people more human. You know, everyone has a struggle. Everyone has insecurity.
Yeah.
And even, you know, even people who are on the top, they still have like imposter syndrome. Everyone has imposter syndrome. It's really funny. And everyone is like, people will always have issues. So I think when you manage to kind of break into like being more relatable and human, it helps.
So, okay, I have two last questions for you. But one of them is, how was it translating starting writing in English? Because you wrote and did everything in Portuguese, and now you do everything, I don't know, half and half?
No, sadly not half and half. Okay, actually that's the third and probably my biggest challenge. It's the language barrier. This is the one that really drives me crazy until today, because it's a lot of work to do everything into languages, and it's just a lot. It's very time consuming. I could do it, but it's very time consuming. I never made the jump from like Portuguese to English. I could have done it when I moved, but when I moved, I was building my relationships here. That took a lot of time, like of my day.
Yeah.
And then I started writing my book. So I was working on my book for 2 years.
Wow.
And that was kind of like the beginning of my life in London. And because I still work with Brazil a lot, I always went to Brazil a lot. So, and I travel a lot when I'm here as well. I was always that person that was kind of like here, but you know, always away. And then because my base was Brazil, I couldn't just be like, okay, bye. I'm not writing Portuguese anymore, like alienate the whole like Brazilian audience. Because a few people, like some people speak English in Brazil and can read in English, but a lot of people don't.
Yeah, no, it's not. For sure, it's not the majority.
No.
Like, you can't do business in Brazil without speaking Portuguese.
Exactly.
It's very difficult.
So it would be like, it was unthinkable for me to just like switch to English. And then it was a lot of work to do both. Really tricky, and something that still today is like an issue for me, because I would love to do more things in English, but at the end of the day, like my time is the time I have is limited, so I can't. But it's really funny. I think I've been reading about fashion and beauty in English for so long, actually more than in Portuguese, that when I started writing in English was very easy, so easy. And sometimes when I have like a blog and I'm writing like a blog post or whatever, an article in Portuguese, and I have a blog, I do it in English and then kind of flows, and then I translate it back. I want to do more things in English.
It's hard. No, I think it's hard to do that. I once spoke to someone who was going through the same, and I think it's difficult because Brazil is a huge market on its own, and you can't just, it's a different, and I think it's probably the same elsewhere. Like I was once working in a campaign, and it was also like different markets like Turkey, France, Italy, UK, and they're all completely different. The influencers are different, the audiences that they speak to, the way they speak to the audiences, you know. So, you know, I think the industry is super global now, the creative industries, but it's still very local, which is odd.
Yeah, that's exactly the case. And you can't just transfer the same logic and do like both. It's hard. It's a whole, and just think about it. When it's summer here, it's winter there.
Yeah.
So even the basic like content that you feel like doing, you can't just do it once and translate. It's really tricky. So it is more global. It is more connected for sure, but it's still a barrier. Yeah. The language and the culture and the markets.
Okay, V, are you ready? I'm going to ask you a few quick questions, and you just need to go with what comes in your mind.
Okay? I find those the hardest ones.
It's okay. I didn't prepare. I'm going to make them up because, you know, it's you. Do you prefer the rest of your life reading magazines or reading books?
Oh, that's very hard, but I think I would go for magazines.
Yeah. This is the hardest. This is one of the hardest, okay? Truffle pasta or vongole pasta?
No, that's easy for me, vongole. Always.
Beer or chocolate?
Impossible.
For those of you who don't know Victoria,
I refuse to answer that one. Literally, like impossible. I love beer and I love chocolate. I'm not choosing.
Okay, Noronha or Capri?
That's hard.
I know.
No, I don't want to choose as well. I'm really bad at choosing because I believe like the most magical thing about life is that we can have options, and I love having options, and I would hate to do just one thing. So to answer, Noronha is a wonderful island in Brazil.
Yes.
For those who don't know, and Capri is Capri. So I would choose Noronha from November to March and Capri from June to September.
That sounds like a correct answer. Okay, V, what is the...
I'm cheating, but
it's okay.
The only
I'll allow it. What is the what advice you'd give someone who is starting in the publishing industry or journalism industry?
Being very, very adaptable, because nowadays everything is very plural in the sense that before you could have a position in a magazine and be like like a reporter. How to say reporter? I never know.
I don't know.
Like a associate editor, whatever. The things you would have to do is like write copy, go to events, and maybe obviously in my beauty case, like try products, organize the beauty cupboard, things like that. Nowadays you have to do first, you have to do print and you have to do digital. There is no separation anymore. So it's more work.
Okay.
Because you have to do both. You have to also do a bit of the commercial part, which before was unthinkable. So the business model of the publications nowadays funnily enough, became more similar to what bloggers and influencers were doing. Because in magazines before, you would have it was completely separate, the editorial and the commercial departments. Nowadays it's kind of merging together somehow, because people need to be if you're going to an event, you're talking to the person who advertises on your magazine. It's in the end, everything now is very connected, and the publication might want you to do the ad content.
Yes.
You, for example, it's a video or whatever, like a talk, and it's a sponsored thing, but you are doing it. So it's kind of like what an influencer would do.
Yes.
Does it make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
So I think being very
adaptable,
flexible, and working on your own channels, not because you have to be huge necessarily, but I think it's important nowadays for people to have their own presence. I think it's added value.
Okay. That's very good. Thanks, Vicky, for having us.
Thank you.
You even gave me coffee, even though you hate coffee. Obrigada.
Obrigada. Amei.
Thank you for listening to the I Like Networking podcast. Please remember to share, subscribe, and review the podcast so that more people can find us. All the information discussed on this episode will be on the show notes. See you next time.